C, got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris, this shit fire.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. We are 19 days away until the 2026 college football season kicks off, and it cannot get here soon enough because, listen, I am making a list of receipts, and I'm checking it twice, and at the end of the year, we're going to figure out how many of you guys know ball or not, because I'm keeping receipts of all of the Alabama doubters out there. I've been seeing a lot of 8-3, 9-3 record predictions for the Tide this year. I've been seeing all you guys that are predicting that Kalen DeBoer is going to get fired by Alabama in 2-3 years down the road. And I'm here to tell you guys tonight on this episode why doubting Kalen DeBoer and Alabama would not end well, along with how Oklahoma can win the SEC championship this year. There are a lot of folks that are high on Oklahoma, but they're scared to pick Oklahoma to win the SEC championship for reasons unknown. If you're so high on Oklahoma like how you claim to be, why can't you envision a path to where the Sooners win this conference? I was wrong about a controversial move that Ohio State made at the beginning of this year. We will discuss Miami. We all saw what happened last year. They came out of nowhere, had a Cinderella run in the CFP, and they gave Indiana the toughest game of the postseason. Unfortunately, the Canes were unable to get it done, and they lost 9 players from last year's national championship losing team to the NFL. But in spite of those losses, Miami could be a better team this year than what they were last season, and that should scare a lot of people. Auburn, for some reason, is tired of the Florida hype. It sounds like Auburn fans are a little bit jealous that John Summer on the Gators are taking some of that spotlight from them. We'll dive into why this is the case. And the big reason, the one move USC made that guarantees there'll be a playoff team this year. If you live, eat, breathe, sleep, and die football, hey, man, you have come to the right place. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you can't go a day without getting your football fix and you are a football junkie, make sure that you are subscribed. You got post notifications turned on so you do not miss when we drop new content. Without further ado, let's dive into it. The expectations for Alabama feel lower than they've been in a very long time. I've been seeing a lot of Alabama record predictions come out that got the Tide going 8-4, 9-3. Barely anybody's picking them to make it back to the SEC championship. Not a lot of people are picking the Tide to get back to the college football playoffs. And there are a bunch of you all that are extremely low on Kalen DeBoer. And I get the skepticism around Kalen DeBoer as he prepares for his third season as Alabama's head coach, replacing the GOAT, which is Nick Saban. But here's the thing. doubting Kalen DeBoer would not end well. Betting against Alabama this year is how you end up looking stupid in November, because how last season ended is controlling the perception about how good of a team Alabama's going to be this year in year 3 under Kalen DeBoer. We know that Alabama was a flawed team. We know they couldn't run the football to save their life. We knew that they were wussies on the line of scrimmage. We knew that loss week 1 to Florida State was inexcusable. We know that Alabama getting dominated by Georgia in the SEC championship, getting their ass kicked by Indiana in the Rose Bowl, is something that you don't expect out of a program at the level that Alabama is at. We all understand those things, but here's what a lot of the Alabama skeptics are missing about last season. Last season kind of showed how great of a coach Kalen DeBoer is, more so than it showed he's not the right guy post Nick Saban to lead Alabama to another national championship. Despite how flawed Alabama was, they still made it to the SEC championship. They still won a playoff game. How many teams can have as many flaws as what Alabama did last season and still get to the second round of the college football playoffs? Not too many. I think last year more so was the floor, more so than I view it as being foreshadowing what's to come of Alabama's demise under Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer has earned a lot more respect than what he's been given from a lot of you fans, a lot of you people in the national media. You guys treat Kalen DeBoer like he's some unproven coach that went from coaching the G5 to all of a sudden replacing Alabama. Did you forget what Kalen DeBoer did at Washington? In 2 years, he did what Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, and some of these other head coaches who you perceive to be better than Kalen DeBoer have been unable to do, which is lead their program to a national championship. You rate Dan Lanning as a better head coach than Kalen DeBoer, but he's 0-2 against them and has yet to make it to a national championship, although he's had all the resources and all the talent to do so. But you don't have skepticism around Dan Lanning, though, but you do Kalen DeBoer. You have skepticism around the same coach that has one of the best records all time against ranked opponents, 20-6. You're skeptical about a coach that does nothing but win big games, because that's all Kalen DeBoer has done at Alabama. Kalen DeBoer's problem isn't he never has Alabama ready to play in these big primetime games, because anytime you play Alabama in a primetime game, you should get very afraid, because big game Kalen DeBoer, more times than not, is going to win these big games more so than he is going to lose these big games. Kalen DeBoer has proven he can win big games. He's proven that he can recruit at an elite level. Alabama has had a top 3 recruiting class their last 2 seasons under Kalen DeBoer. So the question about Kalen DeBoer isn't about his coaching ability. We know he can win big games. We know he can recruit. We know that he can develop, because he has gotten 2 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. He's gotten several wide receivers, several offensive linemen drafted in the first couple of rounds in the draft. Kalen DeBoer's body of work should give him more respect than what he has been given this offseason among the national media, among you college football fans. You guys are underestimating one of the best coaches in college football, and it's not going to end well. Betting against Kalen DeBoer is how you end up going broke this season coming up, fading Alabama, because Alabama is going to be a lot better than what a lot of you all think. Alabama, at bare minimum, will win at least 10 games and make it back to the college football playoffs again. I have no concerns about how good the quarterback play is going to be from Alabama. Regardless if it's Keelan Russell or Austin Mack, quarterback is not going to hurt Alabama this season. Kalen DeBoer is one of the best quarterback developers in this sport. You give him a guy like a Keelan Russell that has all the talent to be a transcendent level quarterback. Keelan Russell, from a talent standpoint, it's the most talented quarterback to ever walk through Alabama's football program. And that's saying a lot because they've had a lot of very good quarterbacks. But Keelan Russell possesses the kind of ability that you saw Lamar Jackson flash when he won the Heisman Trophy at Louisville. That's the kind of talent that Keelan Russell has the ability to become, being coached by one of the best quarterback developers in this sport. And Alabama also is going to have one of the best defenses in college football. They have the best secondary in America, in my opinion, walking into this season. You got Xavier Brown, Dejon Lee, one of the best quarterback tandems in college football. You got Bray Hubbard and Keon Sabb returning at safety, which gives you the best safety duo in America. The only legitimate questions that I have about Alabama walking into this season is going to be, how improved are they on the line of scrimmage? How improved is that offensive line? How improved is that defensive line? Are they going to be a lot better getting consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks? Are they going to have some semblance of a run game? I'm confident that all those questions are going to be answered once this season starts, and these positions won't hurt Alabama this year like they did last year, because Kalen DeBoer understood the assignment walking into this offseason. The majority of Alabama's portal class is comprised of offensive linemen and defensive linemen. Kalen DeBoer has also recruited offensive line and defensive line pretty well as well. Has a lot of blue chippers in those offensive line and defensive line rooms. Sleeping on Alabama this season would not end well for college football. Betting against Kalen DeBoer, who has a 20-6 record against top 25 opponents, is how you end up going broke and end up looking stupid at the end of this season when Alabama ends up proving you all wrong again due to how good of a coach Kalen DeBoer is. There is not too many coaches in college football without a national championship as good as what Kalen DeBoer is. Sure, Alabama was a flawed team last year, but a lot of teams that had to deal with the kind of flaws that Alabama overcame and still made it to the playoffs with probably don't end up winning 7 games. That tells you how good of a coach Kalen DeBoer is. He's good at making adjustments. He's good at tailoring his game plan and his play calling around his team's strengths and finding ways to minimize their weaknesses. That's the sign of a good coach. A good coach is somebody who can still get the most out of his team, even in spite of his team not being perfect, having obvious flaws. I'm very confident in Kalen DeBoer entering year 3 that he's going to have Alabama right back in the SEC championship conversation and a lock to be right back in the CFP again. I am not going to doubt one of the best big game coaches in all of college football. This is the same guy that's 2-1 against Kirby Smart, the same guy that's 2-0 against Sark and Dan Lanning. All these other coaches who you perceive are much better, much closer to winning a national championship than Kalen DeBoer. He's their father. Alabama writing this program off is not going to end well for you. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, check us out on all social media platforms. You can find us at JTSports_ on Instagram, X, TikTok. If you have any questions, any topics that you would like answered on a future episode, you can add us, send them in the DMs, and we will get to it on a future episode. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to my guy, Stevie G02. He says, the only reason I do not have Alabama in the SEC championship game is because I have OU taking the jump and making it. Hey, I can't get mad at you if you got Oklahoma making it to the SEC championship. I think that a lot of people are high on Oklahoma as they claim. It's more so, I think, and you see this very often with the media, when they get it extremely wrong with a team, the following season, they force themselves to course correct to the point where they're only high on the team because they were wrong about that team the previous season. If people are truly are high on Oklahoma as they claim to be, there should be a lot more conversation around Oklahoma winning the SEC championship. And we're about to get into that. Don't worry. If Oklahoma reaches their full potential this year, the SEC is going to be in trouble. Because if Oklahoma plays up to their potential this year, they're easily going to win the SEC championship this year. When you have a defense as good as what Oklahoma's defense is going to be coming into this season, as long as you don't have an offense that loses you games, you can win this conference. Because every game that Oklahoma has on their schedule, they have a shot at being able to win. That includes being able to beat Texas, who destroyed them last year, and being able to upset Georgia. Oklahoma has the kind of defense that can make any team they go up against play in the phone booth. If you're going to beat Oklahoma, you're going to have a hard time being able to score more than 20 points on this defense. This was one of the best defenses in all of college football. They were only giving up around 16, 17 points per contest. What costed Oklahoma from going a lot further than what they could have went last year is that they had an offense that shot them in the foot. John Mateer, you can't throw 3 interceptions against the Shorthorns, especially with how good Texas is going to be this year. You need John Mateer to play like Stetson Bennett. You don't need John Mateer to play like a Heisman contender. You don't even need John Mateer to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, let alone one of the best quarterbacks in college football. You just need John Mateer to be a good point guard, be a good distributor of the football. Can John Mateer be more accurate throwing the football this year? Can John Mateer miss less wide open wide receivers? Can we see John Mateer improve as far as being able to throw the deep ball more accurately? I believe that we could see John Mateer take that next jump because he's entering his 3rd season under Ben Arbuckle. Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer, if you don't remember, they came from Washington to Oklahoma as a package deal. So normally when you have a quarterback that has this much experience in the same system, he normally ends up being pretty good. Oklahoma also improved John Mateer's supporting cast. Last year, John Mateer's best receiver was Isaiah Statenia by a pretty good margin. Anytime Oklahoma got a big play in the passing game, the majority of times, it was to Isaiah Statenia. Now you add Terrell Harris and Parker Livingston at receiver out of the transfer portal. You just improved John Mateer's supporting cast at wide receiver. You improved the offensive line by bringing in a few more bodies on the offensive line, which also returns a lot of experience from last year. So you should also see not just an improvement from John Mateer throwing the football, but you should see an improvement out of Oklahoma's ability to run the football as well, which should lead to Oklahoma's offense being less predictable. Last year, it was simple what the game plan was to defend Oklahoma's offense. Keep John Mateer inside the pocket and force him to beat you throwing the football. Oklahoma this year, though, with what they've added at receiver and the transfer portal, what they've added on to the offensive line, you can finally play complementary football. It's hard to defend Oklahoma's offense this year if you know they have the ability to do a lot more than just dink and dunk their way down the field. Now you're going to have to account for what they can do throwing the football vertically with all the speed that they have at wide receiver when you add Terrell Harris or Parker Livingston alongside of Isaiah Statenia. And with Oklahoma hopefully having an improved offensive line, it improves their ability to run the football. And when you can get the run game going, that also lightens up some of those boxes, or either make some of those boxes heavier, because if you want to load the box and you got a game plan to try to defend not just against the ground game, but you also have to worry about what John Mateer is going to do with his legs, they're going to be able to throw the football behind you. They'll get those linebackers creeping up. Next thing you know, John Mateer is killing you with a 50-yard dime to Isaiah Statenia or Terrell Harris. Oklahoma's offense does need to be able to score 30, 40 points per game. All this offense needs to be able to do is be able to score 28 points per game, and that's good enough to beat 90% of the teams on their schedule this year. Because even if you are going up against Ole Miss, Georgia, and some of the better offenses in the SEC, they are not hanging 30 points on this defense. It is not going to happen. Last year, there were too many games when Oklahoma's offense had to get bailed out by their defense, like against Tennessee. When they lost to Texas, the defense couldn't bail them out because John Mateer had too many turnovers in that game. The new weapons that Oklahoma has offensively raised John Mateer's ceiling, and they also raised his floor. At worst, I still think that John Mateer is good enough for Oklahoma to win the SEC championship. All John Mateer needs to do is reduce his turnovers and also increase his ability to throw the football to the open man. And that alone is good enough for Oklahoma to win the SEC championship. We saw this defense shut down some of the best offenses in college football, and they could have been a lot better if the offense was a little bit more efficient. This year, with the offense improving their supporting cast, that's going to also get more out of the defense because they're going to be on the field for less plays, and they're not going to be in a favorable field position in certain occasions like how they were in certain games last year. And I also think Oklahoma has the ability to be even better this year than what they were last year, in spite of them having a better schedule or a more difficult schedule, because of how improved they're going to be on the offensive side of the football. Oklahoma this year doesn't need to be 2019 LSU or 2020 Alabama offensively. Their defense is one of the best, if not the best, entering this upcoming season. They have not just a lot of talent when it comes to their starters, but they got a lot of depth, especially on the defensive line. A lot of programs would kill to have the kind of talent and depth that Oklahoma has on their defensive line this year. So they can suffocate any offense they go up against. They can take away what you do best, force you to get into a dogfight in the fourth quarter, and that's how Oklahoma can end up beating teams that some of you all may not feel like they have a shot at being able to win. What made Oklahoma so good last year is that they can bully you into a fourth quarter knife fight and be able to find a way to win the game. They were one of the best teams in America at winning one-score contests, and I expect that to continue this year because that's just the identity of this program. When you have a defensive-minded coach, he doesn't mind winning a lot of ugly, low-scoring games. That's the kind of game that Oklahoma wants to get you into. They want to get you into a low-scoring affair. They want you to play their style of football. And Oklahoma, with how suffocating this defense is going to be this year, they can beat anybody on the schedule. They can beat Ole Miss. They can upset Georgia. They can beat Texas. No game is unwinnable for Oklahoma this year as long as their offense doesn't lose them games like how they did on multiple occasions last year. This is a defense that is too good to lose games unless John Mateer and this offense F it up, and I don't think that's going to be the case this year. Oklahoma has a better shot at winning the SEC championship than what they're getting credit for. Everybody just wants to say, oh, sure, Oklahoma's going to be a really good team. But they're kind of putting a ceiling on this team, though. They just want to make up for them being wrong about Oklahoma last year, so they just throw Oklahoma fans a bone to make up for how wrong they were about the Sooners last year. Because we remember when everybody was saying Oklahoma was going to be the SEC's version of Nebraska. We didn't forget how many people were sleeping on Oklahoma. Me and Josh Pate were the only two people that picked Oklahoma to make it to the CFP last year. So now people are trying to overcorrect, but they don't want to overcorrect to the point where they want to believe that Oklahoma is better than being what they were last year. No, Oklahoma could most definitely win the SEC this year. With how good this defense is, nobody in the SEC wants to play Oklahoma, especially with how improved they're going to be on the offensive side of the football, starting with John Mateer, and then you couple in the additions that they made in the transfer portal at wide receiver, how they improved on the offensive line, how that's going to improve their rushing attack and improve their ability to play complementary football on offense. Look out for Oklahoma this year. Do not be shocked if you see Oklahoma winning the SEC championship this year. This is a team that is even better than what they were last year. And in spite of their schedule increasing in difficulty, this is a defense that nobody in America wants to play against. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you do not miss when we drop new content. We're talking all things football, not just college football, but NFL as well, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. Also, if you're enjoying this episode, make sure that you check us out on all podcasting platforms. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones in audio format on Apple and Spotify. If you enjoy the content you want to support, give us a 5-star review. The links are down in the description below. Shout out to Leroy H9D. He says, roll tide, roll. Stevie G02 says, JT, did you just see the portal pickup you got tonight? No, I did not. I kind of missed it. My guy Robert Troll 5579 says Bama looking like 8-4, 9-3. Man, we're just gonna have to see, my dude. We're just gonna have to see. At the beginning of this year, Ohio State made a very controversial move when they lost their former offensive coordinator, Brian Hartline, to USF to become their next head coach. They had to find a new offensive coordinator, and Ohio State hired Arthur Smith to replace Brian Hartline as far as offensive play calling duties. And there were a lot of split opinions about this decision, about this move. 50% is in the majority of saying that while Arthur Smith might not have been the preferred Brian Hartline replacement, you got to give Ryan Day the benefit of a doubt, because Ryan Day is one of the best head coaches in college football, and everybody that was against the hiring of Matt Patricia was proved wrong last season, with him being one of the best coordinators in all of college football, coaching one of college football's premier defenses. So you have another instant of another guy that's coming from the NFL world that doesn't have the best reputation. Now, Arthur Smith doesn't have Matt Patricia's resume, but he does have a resume that is respectable. He hasn't won a Super Bowl. He hasn't coached in as many big games as what Matt Patricia did. But as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I'm going to be honest. Arthur Smith was a lot better than what he was perceived to be. Before Arthur Smith took over as the Steelers offensive coordinator, the Steelers had a bottom 5 offense in the NFL. Under Arthur Smith's play calling, in spite of him not having the best personnel, not the most talented quarterbacks to work with in his first season, he got Justin Fields and a washed version of Russell Wilson. The Steelers still were in the top half of the league offensively. They were a top 15, top 16 offense, which was around average, which is respectable considering the lack of talent that Arthur Smith had to work with. In his second season, the offense was about the same, but you got a better quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, but the receiving room, the offensive line just wasn't really that great. So Arthur Smith coming to Ohio State makes a lot of sense when you understand how Ohio State lost last year. Ohio State's 2 losses all happened when they were outgained running the football. The opposing teams that they were losing to were killing them on the ground. It was like a 100 to something discrepancy as far as the difference that we saw in Ohio State running the football and the teams that they were losing to running the football. Ohio State and all their losses last year didn't even get over 100 yards. Arthur Smith fixes what Ohio State's biggest issue was last year, which was their lack of physicality. Ohio State lost to Indiana and Miami because they were just too finesse. We all knew Ohio State could win games, spreading you out, throwing the football 40, 50 times. But when you took that ability away and you forced Ohio State to have to beat you by winning the battle on the line of scrimmage, they just didn't have the ability to do that. And every game they lost last year, they got outgained drastically on the ground. Indiana and Miami, They beat Ohio State last year because they were able to make Ohio State play in the phone booth. And Ryan Day recognized that Ohio State got a little bit too cute. They got a little bit too overly dependent on their ability to throw the football with how stacked they always are at receiver. And that's why he hired Arthur Smith. He said Arthur Smith may not be the flashiest hire. He may not be the most innovative coach. But what we need is a guy that's going to bring a level of physicality to our offense that's going to allow us to beat teams like Indiana and Oregon this year, to be able to win 2 straight against that team up north, to be able to win the national championship again. You're going to have to be able to be dominant on the line of scrimmage. And that's the upside that Ohio State has with the hiring of Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith, one thing about this brother is he's all about physicality. You're going to be running a lot of 11, 12 personnel. Ohio State normally doesn't utilize a lot of tight ends. You're probably going to be a little bit more dependent on your tight ends this year, especially with some of the uncertainty around who is going to be the wide receiver 2 behind Jeremiah Smith and how productive they're going to be. If you're worried about Arthur Smith underutilizing the talent that Ohio State has because he underutilized the talent that he had when he was calling plays as Atlanta's head coach, when he was the Steelers offensive coordinator, you could say that he wasn't properly getting the most out of that personnel. Ohio State has so much talent. Unless you're just a complete novice, you're just a jabroni calling plays, it's hard to underutilize the talent that Ohio State has, especially when you got guys like Bo Jackson, Jeremiah Smith. You put the ball in the hands of some of these guys that Ohio State has on offense this year, they give you instant offense. I think what Ohio State benefits the most from with the hiring of Arthur Smith is that your run game could become the best part of your offense. When you have thought about what has been the best part of Ohio State's offense the last couple of years, it normally has been their wide receiver position and how good they've been at throwing the football all over the field. This year, though, Bo Jackson could become the player that this offense flows through. Bo Jackson was really good last year. With Arthur Smith, he could take Bo Jackson's game to a completely different level because Arthur Smith is all about the run game. He's all about getting the most out of any running back that he has. And I think the play action pass game, once you get that run game established with Bo Jackson, with Arthur Smith's play calling, is going to set up easier one-on-one opportunities for Jeremiah Smith, because we know Jeremiah Smith gets double teamed, sometimes triple teamed very often. You're not going to triple and double a guy when you have to account for the run, because an extra guy that you add on Jeremiah Smith is an extra guy that you take away in run defense. And hiring Arthur Smith allows Ohio State to be more versatile with how they move the ball down the field offensively this year. Last year, Ohio State didn't win the Big Ten championship game because they got dominated on the line of scrimmage by Indiana. And the same thing happened in their second round playoff game, fresh off a bye, against Miami. When you can force Ohio State to play in the phone booth, you make them uncomfortable. That is not a style that Ohio State has normally been known for. With Arthur Smith, though, you put Ohio State in the phone booth and they could still kick your ass this year because you just have a different mentality offensively with Arthur Smith calling the plays. Now, Arthur Smith ultimately decides what Ohio State's stealing, Arthur Smith this season ultimately decides what Ohio State's ceiling is going to be this season. Against lesser teams, it doesn't really matter because we know Ohio State can out-talent the majority of the teams that they have on their schedule this year. But when they're going against Oregon, Indiana, USC, Michigan, that's when this hiring is really going to be evaluated properly, because now you're not going to be able to beat teams solely by out-talenting them. You're going to have to be able to out-strategize them, outmaneuver them, out-coach them. And that's really when we're going to have a proper assessment, a proper viewpoint of if Ryan Day and Ohio State truly got it right or wrong when it comes to the hiring of Arthur Smith. If Arthur Smith works, Ohio State, not only will they win the Big Ten this year, but I think they, at the bare minimum, will appear in the national championship because Arthur Smith will fix their biggest weakness that cost them in the postseason last year, which was their lack of physicality. Now, if Arthur Smith doesn't work, it's not going to completely derail Ohio State's season to the point they don't even make it to the playoffs. At worst, Arthur Smith doesn't work out. Ryan Day, Matt Patricia, and the talent that Ohio State possesses is good enough to overcome a bad hire. It's just you're capped as far as what your ceiling is. If Arthur Smith doesn't work out, then at best you're a 10-2 team and you get to the second round of the playoffs and you can't get no further because you need better coordinators, a better coaching staff to advance further throughout the playoffs. But I'm more in the middle. I think Arthur Smith will work out, but I don't know just exactly how good he's going to be when you're going up against an Indiana or you're going up against one of the better coaching staffs in the CFP. But I have to give Ryan Day the benefit of a doubt because he is one of the 3 best coaches in the sport at the moment. And Nick Saban even had this ability. Some of the best coaches in college football have the ability that even if they get it wrong with a OC or a DC hire, just with how good of a coach they are, they can overcome that and kind of carry that dude. I don't think Arthur Smith will be that bad. I actually think that Arthur Smith, I was kind of sleeping on this hire. Now that I've had a few months to process what the vision was with hiring Arthur Smith, what the goal was with hiring Arthur Smith, I have a lot more confidence that this thing might actually work. Normally, when you have a team that comes out of nowhere, makes it to the CFP, has a Cinderella run to the national championship, and then they go on to lose 9 players off that team to the NFL, you don't think there's a chance they can come anywhere close to replicating that national championship run last year. But Miami has gotten even better this year than what they were last season when they lost to Indiana in the national championship. Miami is no longer at a point where you have to question their ability to reload. Sure, losing a guy like a Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, Francis Malgoa, Keontae Scott, that shit hurts. It's not easy to just replace players like that, especially a Ruben Bain, who was the heart and soul of Miami football up until the rise of Malachi Toney. But the thing about Miami now compared to what they have been over the past 2 decades when they've been in hibernation is that they haven't recruited as well as what they have over these last 3-4 years under Mario Cristobal. We all know that Mario Cristobal lives, eats, breathes, sleeps, and dies recruiting. And the thing about Miami's big losses is that the majority of them are coming on the line of scrimmage. One thing about Mario Cristobal, being a former offensive lineman, he knows what an elite offensive line looks like. He knows what it takes to build an elite line of scrimmage on the offensive line and defensive line. Everywhere Mario Cristobal has been, from Miami to Oregon to even FIU, the strength of his football teams has always been the line of scrimmage. You look at some of the guys that Miami has coming into this season that are going to be replacing Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, like a Marquise Lightfoot, Justin Scott. Looking at the talent in Miami's defensive line, offensive line room, pretty much all of these guys were top 100 recruits. All of these guys were highly sought after coming out of high school. All of these guys move freakishly well for their size. Mario Cristobal has a blueprint that he looks for and how he builds out the line of scrimmage. He has a certain player build that he looks for when he's recruiting certain players at these positions. He's not just looking for big guys. It's not just mass kicks ass with Mario Cristobal. It's mass kicks ass when that mass that's moving around is more athletic than the majority of mass that you can find playing that position. When you watched Miami on the line of scrimmage last year, the way that they played with this level of physicality and violence, with Ruben Bain seemingly just beating everybody off the snap as soon as the quarterback hiked the ball, was because the players that Miami is recruiting on the line of scrimmage are superhumans. That's why I told you guys that Miami was going to beat Ohio State, because despite how good of a team Ohio State was last season, they did not play a team that had the kind of athletes on the line of scrimmage that Miami had. And when you have guys that are like 350 plus, running 4.6, 4.7 all over the place, you cannot game plan for that. You can't. And Miami still has a bunch of those kinds of players on the team in spite of the losses of Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain. When we look at the secondary that this defense is going to have year 2 under Corey Heatherman, this could be one of the best secondaries in college football. Miami is loaded at corner. They're loaded at safety. You got O.J. Frederick, who is a projected first-round pick. You have Xavier Lucas. You have Ethan O'Connor, who didn't really get a lot of playing time last year. More so as a guy, Mario Cristobal got out of the portal and said, hey, you may not play a lot this year, but next year, you set yourself up to have a starting role. You know, on the offense side of the ball, Miami upgraded at quarterback. I'm not saying that Carson Beck was trash. I would never trash a brother from the 904. I would never shit on somebody from my hometown. I just can't do it. And I also can't crap on Carson Beck, because in spite of some of the bad moments he had when he threw those 4 ham sandwiches against Louisville, when he threw that ham sandwich that lost Miami the game in overtime against SMU, we still got to talk about the good moments that Carson Beck had, like when he was slicing and dicing Notre Dame week 1, when he was going off against FSU, when the brother put on a masterclass game-winning drive to beat Ole Miss and get Miami to national championship. So while it's easy to shit on Carson Beck for throwing that ham sandwich that lost Miami the national championship game, you also can't forget what Carson Beck did for Miami to even get to that game. And for somebody that's been a Miami fan for pretty much my entire life watching college football, that was my first time truly witnessing Miami be what Miami is supposed to be. Because unlike some of you older Hurricanes fans, I wasn't alive back in 02, 01, or during the peak of Miami football. So for Carson Beck to give me that first opportunity in my lifetime, watching the team that I became a fan of at the beginning of the low point of this program, I became a Miami fan at the start of the Al Golden era. So I haven't been around to witness Miami when they've been at their best. Carson Beck provided me with that first opportunity. And I will always respect and admire Carson Beck for what he did his lone season playing for the Hurricanes. But we can admire and respect what Carson Beck did last year while also being honest and admitting that Darian Mensah is a significant upgrade at the quarterback position from Carson Beck, because unlike Carson Beck, you can tell Darian Mensah, hey, go put the team on your shoulders and go win us a game. If everything isn't going right, you can trust Darian Mensah to still get Miami a win. Darian Mensah is just a better overall quarterback physically and athletically than what Carson Beck was. He's more mobile. He can extend plays. He can be a factor in the run game. And he's just a better overall quarterback than Carson Beck. Carson Beck went in the 3rd round. Darian Mensah is a projected first-round pick. He could be the first quarterback taken in next year's draft over Dante Moore, over Arch Manning. I haven't heard a lot of analysts say this, but me personally, I would take Darian Mensah first overall if I was a team in the 2027 draft in need of a quarterback. Everywhere Darian Mensah has been, he's won at lesser programs. He was winning at Tulane. He led Duke to the ACC championship. You got people talking about winning the ACC championship ain't nothing. The ACC sucks. It's not about how good the conference is, you dumb. It's about Darian Mensah bringing football success to a program that is known for being a basketball school and carrying his team. This dude threw 500 passes last year and was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football. So you give a guy like Darian Mensah the kind of talent he's going to be surrounded by at Miami, this dude's going to put up Heisman level numbers. Darian Mensah could go on to have the best season statistically in the history of Miami football that we've ever seen a quarterback have that has put on that Miami Hurricanes uniform. You got Malachi Tony. You brought your tag team partner from Duke, Cooper Bartek. You also got a lot of other good receivers out of the transfer portal, like Cam Vaughn, Verjarius Jacobs. Both of those guys were a lot better than what the stats showed last year. They could have been a lot better if their quarterback situations were a lot better than what they had last year. You have a lot more talent at wide receiver this year than what you had last year. Miami is loaded everywhere. They're loaded at quarterback. They're loaded at receiver. They're still loaded on defense. And the secondary and the defensive line, despite the losses of Francis Mauigoa, Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, and the other notable talent that Miami lost from last year's team to the NFL, Miami has reloaded, and they are coming into this season an even better team than what they were last year, in spite of losing to Indiana in the national championship. Miami doesn't have to rebuild. You don't have to question if Miami has enough replacements for Ruben Bain or Akeem Mesidor. It doesn't matter. If Miami isn't getting guys drafted and they're not in a position where they have to find new guys to replace other great players, then the program is not where they need to be. This is a position Miami wants to be in. You want to have these conversations about who's going to replace this great player, because that means that Miami is developing guys, and they're developing them so well to the point that they're good enough to be high draft picks in the NFL, which then means that you have to do it all over again. You can't keep these guys forever. You want these guys to play for 3 years and then declare for the draft. And then do the same thing all over again. Rinse, wash, and repeat, because that's the sign that you have a football machine, and that's what Miami is becoming. Miami wasn't just a one-year Cinderella story. They weren't just this feel-good story, this underdog that kind of came out of nowhere. No! Miami last year showed you that we ain't coming no more. We're here, and we're here to stay, and we're here to dominate. I'm telling you guys, man, everybody keeps questioning how Miami's going to replace this dude, who's going to replace that dude. It doesn't matter. Miami is built to reload and replace anybody in spite of how good they are. You lose Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, okay. Damon Wilson, step up. Marquise Lightfoot, step up. Ahmad Morton, step up. You know, there are a bunch of guys in that room that have the capability of being able to fill those shoes and get drafted just as high as what those guys got drafted. This year's Miami team is built to finish the job. Last year had a lot of names. This year, you don't have a lot of recognizable names right now because you will know about them at the end of this season. Miami has less limitations this year than what they had last year. I would be scared of any team that has to play Miami this year because you're going up against a Miami team that lost to Indiana in the national championship and somehow got even better. How many teams can lose in the national championship and say that we came back even better than what we were when we lost that game? Not too many. I'm not being biased. I'm not being a homer. Miami is going to be right back in the national championship this year, man. Miami is a football factory now. When you talk about Miami, you no longer talk about Miami letting you down like how they used to let us down before Mario Cristobal arrived. When Miami gets these big games, we expect to win. And we will win because we have the talent. We have the bodies on the line of scrimmage. We have the superhumans. Miami's going to be back in the national championship. I still don't know if they're going to win that thing, but I would be shocked if we don't see Miami at least at the bare minimum in the semifinals. There is a SEC team that has a fan base, or let me rephrase that. There's a fan base in the SEC that is sick and tired of all the hype that Florida is getting entering their first season under new head coach John Sumrall. So I put out a clip a few days ago that did some numbers on TikTok and Facebook. It was about how Auburn is going to be their early season litmus test to proving if all the hype we've been giving John Sumrall this offseason is justified, or are we going to be proven wrong again? And he's going to end up making all this hype look like it was undeserved once the season starts and Florida doesn't start producing as what we expect them to, with John Sumrall being perceived as an upgrade from Billy Napier. Now, I didn't say that as a slight against Auburn. I have a lot of respect for Alex Golesh. Alex Golesh was one of my favorite hires of this coaching cycle, and I think Auburn is going to be a solid football team this year. But I just don't think that Auburn is going to be a better team than Florida, and a lot of Auburn fans are jealous of the hype that Florida has received this offseason because they believe that their new head coach is just as good, if not maybe slightly better, than John Sumrall. Because Alex Golesh came from the same conference that John Sumrall was coaching in. John Sumrall was coaching in the American. Alex Golesh was coaching in the American. Alex Golesh also is bringing the majority of his USF offense to Auburn. So while, sure, you're going to have a new coach, you're not going to have a new coach bringing in a bunch of guys that are learning a new system. You're bringing in your quarterback, one of the better quarterbacks in college football, Byron Brown. You got one of the better defensive coordinators in college football. Auburn is a solid team. But the difference between Auburn and Florida, and why I believe John Sumrall will have more success year one at Florida compared to Alex Golesh year one at Auburn, is that Auburn is still more of a rebuild than what Florida is. Sure, you can say that if we had better coaching, if we had better play calling than Hugh Freeze, we would have been a much better team than what we were last year, which is the same thing that Florida fans say when they say that John Sumrall is an upgrade from Billy Napier. If we had better coaching than Billy Napier, we're better than a 4-8 team. I get that. But Auburn is a little bit further away than where Florida is as far as their ability to be a potential dark horse playoff team this year. The reason why Florida is getting all this hype is because in spite of how bad of a coach Billy Napier was, this dude was a phenomenal recruiter and a phenomenal talent evaluator. You compare what John Sumrall is inheriting from Billy Napier compared to what Alex Golesh is inheriting from Hugh Freeze, Florida has a much better team year one under John Sumrall than what Auburn has year one under Alex Golesh. Because while Alex Golesh is bringing in a bunch of USF transfers, how many of these guys are good enough to play at a high level in the SEC? Because John Sumrall isn't bringing a huge portal haul full of Tulane transfers to Florida. He already has inherited a bunch of high-level players that we know can produce in the SEC. We know about Dallas Wilson and what he did when he single-handedly kicked Texas' ass last year. We know about Vernell Brown. Auburn fans know about Eric Singleton because he was playing for your team last year, and he's playing for John Sumrall this year. Florida has a lot more talent on the defensive line than what Auburn has. One thing I will give Auburn over Florida is that you have a better secondary than Florida. With everything that you returned, I think your secondary could be better than Florida's this year. But outside of that, Florida has a much better team than what Auburn has this year. And I think they have less limitations than what Auburn is going to have, because when you factor in the style of offense that Auburn runs with Alex Golesh coming from the Josh Heupel Tennessee coaching tree, you know that Auburn's going to want to get their plays in quick. And a lot of their drives aren't going to last long, which is going to put Auburn's defense on the field for a lot more plays, a lot more possessions than what they were on the field for last year. I get it. DJ Durkin is a phenomenal defensive coordinator. I'm not saying that Auburn's going to suck defensively because DJ Durkin is a bad defensive coordinator. They don't have talent on that side of the ball. I'm telling you that Auburn is not going to be that great defensively this year because their offense is going to hurt them. You cannot expect to have a top 50 defense when you're in the bottom 6 of college football and average time of possession. It just doesn't happen that often. And even if you look at USF's defense last year, they were more so good because they were really good at getting stops in the red zone and forcing takeaways. I don't know if the style of offense that Alex Golesh is going to be running is going to be beneficial to this defense. It's kind of one of those addition by subtraction kind of things. When you run an offense that's such high tempo, sure, you tire out the opponent's defense, but you put your defense at a disadvantage, especially when you're going up against a John Summerall coach Florida team, which wants to make their identity running the football down your throat. You don't want to be having 2-3 minute drives and then all of a sudden your defense is on the field for an 8-9 minute drive because John Summerall is sledgehammering you to death with Jaden Ball at running back. That is just not a winning style of play for beating Florida this year, in my opinion. That's pretty much the lone reason why I think Florida has a higher ceiling than what Auburn has this year, because I think that Auburn is going to be in a lot of games that they're going to have to win, requiring their offense to win shootouts because their offense is going to hurt their defense's capability, because in spite of how great of a defensive coordinator DJ Durkin is, I don't think he has the depth in order to have the kind of defense that you would like to have with this style of offense. When Tennessee went to the playoffs 2 years ago, look at how loaded their defensive line was. You had James Pierce Jr., one of the best pass rushers in all of college football, who destroyed it as a rookie last year. He was the first Falcons player to have double-digit sacks in damn near a decade. This dude was a monster. They had a lot of depth on the defensive line, at linebacker, at corner. Auburn in year one under Alex Golesh, sure, you're bringing in a lot of former USF guys and you're bringing in a big portal haul, but more so when you're bringing in such a massive portal haul, you're bringing in guys that you're hoping are good starters. Finding good starters is your number one priority. It's kind of hard to find good starters in good depth when you're bringing in such a massive portal haul. I understand why Auburn fans are jealous of all the hype and the love affair that the media is having when it comes to them entering their first season under John Summerall, because the same reasons people are hyping up Florida because they got John Summerall, the same reasons why you feel like you should be getting a lot more hype. But it's just Florida's roster, it's just a little bit further ahead compared to what Auburn's roster is right now as far as being able to compete for a possible playoff spot. Now, I could be wrong, but if I had to pick the winner between Auburn and Florida today, I'm going with Florida. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. We're talking all things football 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. Join our Discord server if you're trying to talk football 24/7, whenever you want. We want to hear from you. Go ahead, join the JT Sports Discord. The link is in the description below. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to Trey Johnson. Shout out to Robert 4579. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, man. I appreciate you guys tapping in with the late live stream tonight. You guys must be some football sickos. You're up at 11:36 p.m. Eastern time listening to your boy talk college football, man. I greatly appreciate every single one of you that's tuned in. One last thing before we get up on out of here, man. Lincoln Riley's lack of credibility is the biggest hurdle that you have to overcome when you're trying to make the argument with somebody for why USC is finally going to make it to the college football playoffs under Lincoln Riley. Everybody knows Lincoln Riley knows offense. We know that he is Mr. QBU. There is no QBU in college football. Lincoln Riley is QBU because it seems like every quarterback he touches turns into a Heisman winner and the first overall pick in the NFL draft. The question about Lincoln Riley has never been about offense. It's always been about, are his teams going to look serious on the line of scrimmage? Does he have an offensive line that can stand in the paint with Oregon, Indiana are some of the better teams that USC has to play this year? And more importantly, does Lincoln Riley finally have a defense that's good enough for USC to get to the CFP? Because this just isn't a Lincoln Riley USC problem when it comes to the defense. Even at Oklahoma, he didn't really have a lot of great defenses. We know Lincoln Riley can score. He can put points up on the scoreboard. But can he field a defense that can stop other teams from putting points on the scoreboard against him? It's the biggest question. And I think Lincoln Riley finally got the answer to that with the hiring of new defensive coordinator Gary Patterson. And if the name Gary Patterson sounds familiar to you, yes, this was the guy who turned TCU from being a relevant small-time program to being a borderline national championship contender in certain seasons. And he also is in the College Football Hall of Fame, and USC is paying Gary Patterson a lot of money to field a playoff defense this year, which I believe that he will. You see, a lot of the improvement that USC has made as a program, as far as their identity, their philosophy, how they've gone about changing their approach to their strength and conditioning program, how they recruit, has been ignored because people take the outcome of last season and they use it to define everything about USC football. Just because USC missed the playoffs last year doesn't mean that they're not recruiting good enough players on the line of scrimmage. It doesn't mean that they're incapable of ever being able to get there under Lincoln Riley. It more so is that USC still had some improvements that needed to be made before they were ready to take that next jump under Lincoln Riley, and hiring Gary Patterson was the move that USC had to make in order for them to take this next step and make it to the college football playoffs last year. And even then, in spite of last year being somewhat viewed as a disappointment because USC didn't make it to the CFP, if it wasn't for them playing that sloppy game that they lost to Illinois, they would have won 10 games and they would have been in the CFP. They had a top 50 defense last year. The only big issue with USC defensively last year was their inability to get off the field and third down. There were too many occasions when USC's defense needed a big stop in third down situations, and they just couldn't do it. The jump this year is USC being able to not just be a lot better getting you off the field in third down situations, but just to be a lot better overall as a whole on defense. Gary Patterson is inheriting a top 50 defense. He's inheriting the most talented defense that Lincoln Riley has ever fielded. You no longer have to question with USC defensively, do they have the bodies on the defensive line? Have you seen Jakeem Stewart? That dude is built like a guy that should be a future top 10 pick in the NFL. He has the size, he has the athleticism, and there are a lot of other guys on that USC defensive line that are built the same way. They got a lot of talent at linebacker. They got a lot of talent at corner. They are deep. They have not just very good, talented players, but they also have a pretty good amount of depth, and they also are going to have a lot of talented true freshmen coming in that are going to have a big impact on this USC defense and this defense's ability to be good enough to finally help Lincoln Riley change the narrative about him and earn him more credibility and finally get USC to the playoffs. Lincoln Riley hiring Gary Patterson has improved the trust level that I have when it comes to viewing USC as a legitimate playoff contender. Deanne Lynn leaving should have been a bigger setback than what it proved to be. But instead of Lincoln Riley panicking, he said, you know what? I'm just not going to replace good with good. I'm going to replace good with great. And you couldn't have hired a better guy to be your defensive coordinator than Gary Patterson. This guy has coached several of college football's best defenses at TCU. Remind you, the Big 12, when TCU was at their peak, was really known for great defense. And Gary Patterson's defenses kind of were a lot different than what you normally saw out of the Big 12. And also remind you that Lincoln Riley has crossed paths with Gary Patterson in the past. So he knows more than anybody how difficult it is to have success against a Gary Patterson coach defense. USC has the talent. and they got the coaching now. Now it just comes down to them being able to get the job done when the season begins. And the reason why Lincoln Riley hiring Gary Patterson is going to get USC to the playoffs is because he's the difference in USC's ability to win three of their biggest games this season. Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana are all games that are going to determine if USC gets the CFP or not. And the hiring of Gary Patterson is going to play a huge factor in determining if USC can win one or two of those games. Remember, Oregon is going to have a new offensive coordinator this year and replace Will Stein taking Kentucky's head coaching job. So with Oregon having a new offensive coordinator going up against USC's new DC and Gary Patterson, if Gary Patterson is the winner of that head-to-head coaching matchup on the sidelines, in the press box, wherever these brothers are going to be calling plays at, I'm pretty confident that USC beats Oregon. Everybody keeps making it seem like USC has no chance in hell at being able to beat Oregon. Yes, they do, because of the hiring of Gary Patterson. I strongly doubt that Oregon's offensive coordinator is going to be able to outcoach Gary Patterson. This guy is fresh blood. Gary Patterson has been doing this thing for a very long time. Hell, Gary Patterson has probably been calling plays. He's been coaching college football for just about as long as Oregon's new offensive coordinator has been alive. Ohio State has a new offensive coordinator, and Arthur Smith. And a lot of people are pretty split on how good Arthur Smith is going to be in the new role of Ohio State's offensive coordinator. So if you're not that high on Arthur Smith, I could see Gary Patterson getting the better of that matchup also. Indiana has the best coaching staff in America. If USC is going to make it to the playoffs, it's not more so about the talent. It's USC's coaching staff versus Oregon's coaching staff versus Ohio State's coaching staff versus Indiana's coaching staff. And USC has the coaching staff to be able to win these matchups. I trust Gary Patterson to get the better of Arthur Smith. I trust Gary Patterson to get the better of whoever is Oregon's new offensive coordinator. And USC also plays Oregon early during the season. A lot of upsets occur early during the season because there might be some growing pains. We really don't know how well this thing is going to work out with Oregon's new OC, especially with them promoting the guy from within. It worked the last time when they lost Kenny Dillingham to Arizona State and they replaced him from within with Will Stein. Is it going to work out as seamlessly the third time? I don't know. Against elite teams, hires like Gary Patterson mattered the most because oftentimes the difference in these games isn't more so the talent, but it's a few plays where if you're a coach, you wish you could have that play call back or this play call worked out well for you. And I think this is going to be the case for USC this year with Gary Patterson being their new defensive coordinator. USC, if Gary Patterson works out, you're going to finally be good enough to get to the CFP because now you have a defense that is not too far away from how good the offense is, and you now have balance. And I think the hiring of Gary Patterson is the difference in USC being a playoff team compared to what they were last year. And even then, they went 7-2 in the Big Ten, and they returned, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the Big Ten, and Jayden Maiava, the Samoan gunslinger. Some of y'all be sleeping on Jayden Maiava. You know who had the second highest QBR in college football last year behind Fernando Mendoza? It was Jayden Maiava, and yet my guy Josh Pate doesn't even view him as the best or the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. I think he has him as what? The fourth best quarterback in the Big Ten? I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. Anytime you have a quarterback that's entering their third season in the Lincoln Riley offense with this amount of experience returning on the offensive line, with this amount of talent on defense, having USC in the playoffs is a pretty safe bet, in my opinion, this year. I'm drinking all the USC Kool-Aid. Either I'm going to look like a genius at the end of the season, or you guys are going to be clowning me like you were clowning me when Indiana beat Miami in the national championship. But I'm pretty confident that USC is going to shock the world this year, and Gary Patterson is going to be a huge reason why. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for hanging with me tonight. We're probably going to be going live around this time for the foreseeable future, since this is when we get our most viewership. I don't know what it is with you guys being up late wanting to hear me talk about football, but I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Follow us at JT Sports _ where you can find us on all of our social media platforms, Instagram, X, TikTok. Please follow us. We would love to interact with you. We would love to, go back and forth with you in the DMs. We would just love to engage with you guys a lot more. So if you guys would love to talk to your boy, interact a little bit more, go ahead, follow us at JT Sports _ where you can find us on TikTok, X, Instagram. Hey, they say you give your team extra good luck when you rate the JT Sports Podcast 5 stars. Even if you're not a guy that's superstitious, why would you not give your team an extra boost of luck if you have the opportunity to? So if you want your team to have a little bit more luck on their side when it comes to having a successful season, rate the JT Sports Podcast 5 stars on Apple, Spotify. It helps us out a lot. It's free to do. The links are down in the description below. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys shortly